Hi, I'm Sensei Allison from Code Ninja's Wellesley, and today I'll be talking to you about arrays again. This is the third video in our series on arrays, and today we'll be doing a little more work in the console. If you need to go back and look at our concept video and the first video about understanding arrays in the console, feel free to pause and go look at those before. Sometimes you want to be able to perform an operation that involves all of the elements of an array, like printing all elements or adding one to every number. The best tool for this is the for loop. Let's say we have an array of random numbers that we'll store with the variable name nums. I'm going to write a little function that prints the largest number in an array. I'll use this little button on the console here to make the console comfier to code in. I'm going to be writing a couple of lines of code, so I need more room. So what happens here with this tool is you write all of your code, and you can use multiple lines. Using the enter button doesn't run the code anymore. Instead, you have to use this button. And then the results of your code will show up over here, like they did when we were running single lines in the console. First, we'll declare the variable nums to hold an array of random numbers. Let's say -68, 96, 88, -40, 71, 15, -31, 49, 70, and -94. Good. So we have our array of random numbers. So now we'll declare the function printLargest and say that it takes one parameter, which is the array to look for the largest element in. So we declare that as function printLargest, and let's call the parameter r, short for array. In our function body, we'll initialize a variable to hold the largest element. We won't give it a value to start with, since we don't know if the starting value might be larger than the elements of the array, or maybe the array is empty. Now we'll create our for loop. The loop counter variable will keep track of where we are in the array, so it should start at 0 and stop at 1 less than the length of the array. The loop counter should advance only one spot in the array for each loop execution. We write this like so. So we have our for keyword, we start our parentheses, and we need our opening and closing brackets for our code block, and then we initialize our loop counter variable, and we'll start it at 0, and it's going to be less than this property called length, r.length, and we want the loop counter variable to increase once every iteration. So notice that we use this .length property of the array. This property is how we ask the computer how many elements there are in the array. The terms size and length are interchangeable when referring to an array, as they both mean the number of elements in the array. Now, we want to check if the array element that we're currently looking at is larger than the previous largest number we found. We do this by writing a conditional that is true if the current element is larger than largest. So we start our if conditional, and it has the parentheses for its conditional statement and the brackets for its conditional instructions. And then our condition is going to be if the element of array whose index is represented by the value of I is greater than the variable largest. If the conditional is true, we should reassign largest to the current element. Largest, then we use our assignment operator, and then we pull the element at index I out of the array and assign it to largest. Finally, after the loop is finished, we've found the largest element of the array, so we should print it. We use console.log for this. If we try to run this, nothing happens, because all we've done is initialize an array and declare a function. We have to actually call the function on our array if we want anything to happen. We do this by writing our function call, which is the function name, and then we give it a real array instead of just a placeholder represented by its parameter. And then we close the parentheses for the arguments, and then we use a semicolon. So let's try to run this. Hey, wait! The console log says that the largest element of the array is undefined. What's up with that? The problem is that we didn't initialize the variable largest. which means that we never assigned anything to the variable largest. When we try to use the comparator greater than in this conditional, it doesn't work because largest is undefined right now. Greater than only works on numbers. There are two solutions to this. The first one is to initialize largest to some number. How do you make sure that you use an initializing value that won't be bigger than any number in your array? You can use a special number defined as the smallest number that JavaScript can reliably represent. You're probably a little confused by this. After all, aren't there infinite positive numbers and infinite negative numbers? Indeed there are. However, your computer is not infinitely large. Every time you add a number's place to your counting, like how when you count from 999 to 1000, you go from 3 numbers to 4, your computer needs to add another wire to its circuits. Those circuits are what your computer uses to perform arithmetic. When a number gets too big to fit onto all of the wires on your computer's addition and subtraction circuits, addition and subtraction start acting in ways that you don't expect them to. So the computer engineers that made those circuits chose a size for the largest and smallest numbers the computer would be able to represent that would be reasonable for your everyday needs without making the computer too large. Fun fact: this is why scientists need special computers for experiments in fields like physics and astronomy. Physicists perform experiments on the tiniest pieces of the universe, and astronomers study galaxies and planets that are farther away and larger than we could imagine. You and I don't need 37 number places to represent the score in a video game, but a scientist does to track the tiniest movement of an atom or the amazing speed of a comet. We can access these largest and smallest numbers by using the names of certain constants. We talked about what constants are in the second video about functions, but we can review it. A constant is a variable whose value can't be changed once it's set. So, we have a constant called number.minSafeInteger and another called number.maxSafeInteger. An integer is a whole number and is the most common type of number for us to use. If you want to see some of that strange behavior, try a few experiments in the console. Here, I'll show you some. For now, I'll just comment out this call to this function, and commenting out means that I tell the computer ignore this line of code, and after that I'm going to say instead I want you to console log the minSafeInteger. Let's see what that does. I don't quite know how to say that number. That's pretty small. Let's try and subtract from that number and see what happens. We went from 1 to 2. That is indeed how subtracting from a negative number works. Let's try -2. We stayed at 2 in the ones place. That doesn't seem quite right. So you can see that the subtraction is starting to get a little funky for this number, and it'll get funkier as we get further away from the minimum safe integer. So if we try 3, we went from 2 to 4 in the ones place. So that's interesting. Then we can try -4. Went from 4 to 6. A little more interesting. From 6 to 6. That's not right. And still at 6. Your computer does have limitations, but in everyday life, you really aren't going to be using a number this small, so you don't really come across it that often. Back to print largest. What does number.minSafeInteger have to do with fixing our function? We can initialize largest to number.minSafeInteger. Now if we run our program, the console should print out the largest number in the array. Hey, it does! 96 is the largest number in our array. Awesome, we debugged our function. However, there is still a problem with it. I'll show you with an example. I'm going to leave the function the same, but instead of calling print largest on nums, I'm going to initialize an empty array. And then I'm going to call print largest on our empty array. And then we're going to see what happens. When we call print largest on an empty array, our console prints the minimum safe number. That can't be right. If we have no elements, is that what we really want our function to do when we have no elements? What we've discovered here is called an edge case. This is a specific input to our function that should make us think about how our function should act in strange and exceptional cases, like empty arrays. You can't guarantee that every input to your function will look as it should. We have to write our function for what's possible, not the general case. The third version of our function will use a different approach. Let's delete the assignment of number.minSafeInteger to largest. Now, add an OR operator in front of the array element is greater than largest statement in your conditional. Remember how to make that? It's a double pipe. which you can make by holding down Shift and pressing the backslash key, located just below the backspace key on your keyboard. Our first statement in the OR is going to be type of largest triple equals undefined. What's that gibberish mean? The type of a value is whether it's a number, string, boolean, function, array of one of those things, or so on. When we use the type of keyword, we're asking the computer which type the value inside largest is. If largest holds a number, the type is number, or one of the fancy words that we use for number, like integer. If largest has been declared but not initialized, then it doesn't hold anything, so its type is undefined. We use the triple equals operators to say to the computer, please compare both the type and value of largest to undefined. And the triple equals make sure that we go for the specific meaning of undefined that we're looking for, and not just a string of characters that says undefined. If largest is still empty, this statement is true. And if you remember the rules of OR, this makes the whole statement true. So we execute the conditional instructions, meaning that largest won't be empty anymore. How does this fix the behavior of our edge case, the empty array? Well, an empty array has a length of 0. So when the for loop initializes its loop counter variable, the counter starts at 0, and then the loop checks whether the loop counter is less than the array length. Here, the array length is 0, so the condition is false, and we don't execute the loop's code body at all. We skip over it and print the value of largest, which is undefined. The largest value of an empty array is undefined. That makes sense, right? The largest number in a group of no numbers doesn't exist. Now if we try this, we get our desired outcome, undefined. Thanks for watching, and be sure to do your own experimentation with JavaScript in the console. It really can help cement these concepts for you. And come back soon for the last part of our arrays lessons, which will be us doing a design exercise. See you soon.